Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade. The decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today, as you can tell from the title, we are asking in advance, what exactly is Labour's plan for the economy? Because all we are really hearing from Labour's side quite a lot of the time is effectively, we're not as bad as the people in the blue rosettes. And that's been good enough to get 30 points ahead in the polls as they are at the moment, because the Tories just keep shooting themselves in the foot after being in power for 14 years and having an 80-seat majority. And in fact, it's been good enough for a couple of Tory MPs to actually cross the Green-seated chamber to join the Labour side. Why exactly? Because the Tories aren't great anymore and it looks like Labour are going to win next time. Uni-party moment, effectively. We want to keep our cushy £85,000 a year job, plus all expenses paid, and I don't really care if I'm wearing red or blue to do it. Anyway, yesterday, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, was being interviewed on the Newsagents podcast by Emily Mackliss and John Sopel, who are both ex-BBC presenters. Emily, of course, you will hopefully remember, was the person who left the BBC basically saying it's absolutely filled to the brim with Tories, just to go and make her own podcast and interview show The Newsagents, which effectively just does everything that the BBC was doing anyway. But having said that, they actually do it slightly better because they appear to be actually better at pushing politicians in an awful lot of ways with useless questions, but in this case I'm going through an actual useful question that they had. So on the subject of the economy, John Sopel had this to say.
What is the summit of your ambition? Because I listened to Darren Jones on the radio this morning. Where is the big idea? What is there a big idea? Other than we're going to run it better, it's not going to be a crisis.
So just for reference, Darren Jones is the current Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and so obviously was asked on the radio what his ambitions were for when he's in government, and it's absolutely true. All we're really hearing at the moment, at least on soundbite interviews, is simply, we're not the Tories, we'll run it better than them, it won't be chaos. And I can see why it's getting now frustrating for political commentators, especially on the left, because they don't really understand what the big idea from Labour is. And don't worry, this video is going to go through it all.
I think there's two questions you're asking there. First of all, what is success? And second, how are you going to get there? So success is working people feeling and being better off.
I mean, just to simply translate that effectively means we want stonks to go up, which is fine. That is perfectly reasonable for a government to want. Pretty much every government throughout history has wanted stonks to go up, has wanted a better life for themselves and their countrymen. That is a fine indicator of success.
And that is not what working people are experiencing today.
I think to an extent that's true. I don't think they're feeling a drop in living standards necessarily, but they are certainly seeing that, well, life's kind of gone to a standstill. They don't feel like they're any more prosperous than they maybe were 5 years ago. Of course, an awful lot of this is down to COVID and the complete halt of the economy for half a year or more. But of course, no, it's all the Tories' economic fault, despite the fact that Labour wanted harder and longer lockdowns. So how are you supposed to be trusted with the economy then?
And the second question is, how do you get there? And I've set out a programme based on stability, investment and reform. So stability, so that people can plan for the future, businesses and also families.
That's not what you asked at all.
I am not particularly shocked that the newsagents pointed out that wasn't answering the question at all. The question was, what's the big ambition? And if the big ambition is, basic stability, my God, what an ambition. I want the baseline for a functioning country. And amazingly, yes, this was also what the Tories have been saying they want for 14 years while not managing to deliver it. So yes, let's see how they clarify the question.
That's not my question.
I think you're saying, what's your big idea to achieve it? But you asked me, what does success look like for me? And it's not.
I didn't quite frame it like that. I said, what is the? I mean, I cannot think of a single previous election where Labour have gone into it and not had a sort of central policy idea.
Yeah, that is quite the big thing. It's what is your magic bullet? What is your main policy for actually delivering this growth that you are promising? Because all we're really hearing is, yes, we will deliver stability. And as Emily Maitlis and John Sopel are saying, we know that's what you want. How are you going to deliver it? And that's what she isn't answering.
But what is the single standout policy where you go,
Well, I can give you a number of them.
I'm sorry, I just find that so funny. What is your single biggest policy that make people realise, you are actually a unique party with a unique policy that we want to vote for to grow the country? And the very first answer is, oh, well, I can give you a load of policies. It's the kind of answer that says, we don't really have one. That's the problem that Rachel Reeves doesn't seem to be understanding here.
Well, let me give you one example of something that can help grow the economy. We're going to create a national wealth fund endowed with £7.3 billion of public money to bring in private sector investment to invest alongside government.
Oh my God. Their plan is to make corporatism even worse. A huge issue that economies are having at the moment, and that only really seems to work in America because it's the world hegemon, is that there is an incestuous relationship between private and public business. Private contracting would be absolutely fine. An awful lot of private businesses obviously have to outsource some parts of their departments because there are specialised companies that can deal with a problem they have. And it's fine when the government do that too. This is not doing that though. This is effectively trying to get private businesses off the ground by investing in them with public money, making them publicly owned. And the problem with this is that this isn't actually attracting any capital whatsoever. This is forcing capital off taxpayers, whether that be businesses, whether that be working people, whoever, and then redirecting it straight into private business investments, when a much better thing to do than this would be to lower the taxes in the first place and then give a larger allowance to ISAs, which basically do the same thing. All ISAs do is take money from people and then make more of it by investing it into private businesses. Why does everyone in the world own McDonald's? Because everyone puts money into an ISA. Seems to be a good way to keep business running.
In some of the industries of the future, carbon capture and storage.
I'm sorry, you think carbon capture and storage is a good business model? The whole point of carbon capture storage is that it pretty much has to be done by the government because it actually has absolutely no money-making potential whatsoever. This is a massive problem with it. This is why it's not been done yet. And this is probably why private companies are never going to be able to do it unless they're outsourced by the government. What's our big way of making money? Putting a load of public money into carbon capture and storage? Pardon me? Where is the wealth created there? What good does that do in terms of economic growth? I understand that capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and putting it underground is a good idea and something that we should probably do if one of our aims is to reduce carbon emissions. But my goodness, it's not something that we do to grow the economy. If that was the case, we would have invested into it a long time ago.
Gigafactories for electric vehicles.
Second example isn't even an industry of the future. For Elon Musk and Tesla, 2024 has so far been a rough year. First attacks in the Red Sea forced the shutdown of Tesla's Berlin Gigafactory in January, so, obviously that is pretty much an act of God that has caused that problem. However, eco-terrorists shut it down again in March. For some reason, people don't want electric vehicle gigafactories. To top it off, mounting competition from Chinese rivals forced Tesla to slow production in Shanghai in the face of weaker sales. It accumulated in what analysts have called a nightmare quarter, in which sales fell for the first time in 4 years. On Tuesday, Tesla reported it had delivered 386,000 cars in the 3 months ending in March, substantially lower than the 422,000 it delivered during the same period a year earlier. And this has led to investors now looking at Tesla without rose-tinted spectacles. Wall Street analysts have issued successive downgrades to the company's stock amid concerns about slowing sales and a perceived drop-off in innovation. Colin Lanang, an analyst at Wells Fargo, said in March that Tesla was now being valued like a growth company with no growth. The electric car company's stock is down roughly a third so far this year, despite a widespread surge in other technology stocks. The tech-heavy Nasdaq index is at record levels, up around 11% in 2024. What I am saying here is that Rachel Reeves' big plan for growing the economy is to send public money into, already her first two examples are places where you're not going to see too much growth. You've got to bear in mind here as well is that Tesla and Elon Musk get an awful lot of public subsidies to keep the electric vehicle market going, because obviously they want to save the planet with electric vehicles. However, even with that, it appears that the electric vehicle market has possibly reached peak. If it comes back from this, fair enough, but this is not the example I would be using to say, let's get Britain growing. Yet here we are.
Renewable-ready ports of floating offshore wind.
What these effectively are is taking people's money, saying we will invest them in very profitable businesses to get to, invest in new private businesses to innovate on these technologies that actually all already exist anyway, so none of it's going into R&D. And you'll notice that all of those examples, those future technologies, are all, 10, 15, 20-year-old green technology, which by this point, after all the R&D gone into it, you'd expect businesses to be booming off anyway, but they're not. So you need to look into that rather than just keeping money into it. But on the subject of offshore wind, I want to bring your attention to a Guardian article. Why did no offshore wind developers bid? This was 7 months ago, by the way. None of the UK's biggest offshore wind developers took part in the auction after many complained to government ministers and officials that the maximum price had been set too low. The auction awarded a 15-year contract to the clean energy projects that bid the lowest price for the clean electricity they go on to generate. This has helped to drive down the price of renewable energy, but in recent months, high inflation has caused costs across the industry to rise due to the fact that obviously there's less fossil fuels about because of, things going on in the world, and therefore there's more demand for renewable energy. But the government obviously has given out this bid and said, right, this is the starting price, and it's too low for everyone. Offshore wind developers warned that the auction's maximum price, which was similar to previous auction rounds, was now too low for their projects to make any money. They had called on government to raise the auction starting price, arguing that even at higher costs their electricity would be cheap enough to help lower household energy bills. However, industry sources said ministers and mandarins ignored the warnings, and now we're not getting any wind farms. And by the way, that's part of the reason that Rachel Reeves would rather just take everyone's money and invest that money herself into these new wind farms, because private businesses are quote-unquote greedy and want to actually make a profit off their work, whereas apparently when you do it with the government, you can just make a loss. This is apparently supposed to drive growth. And the funniest thing is that I'm not even necessarily against more offshore wind farms. If these people are making money and delivering energy, as far as I'm concerned, that's the market working. But the government gets in the way and says, right, you can't go above this price for your bid, energy price from the wind farm for your bid, and then obviously no one takes it up. And instead of saying, all right, we'll raise it for you, then what do they say instead? It's like, oh, we just won't have wind farms then. And then Labour come in and say, oh yes, we will, we'll just lose money on it. Great. Thanks for delivering that stellar growth by constantly subsidising all these private firms that are going to make no money. Moronic.
And we think that we can bring in 3 times as much private investment as the government puts down in public investments. That's more than £20 billion of private investment.
But hang on though, you've not explained how any of this is actually going to make money. As I just pointed out, wind farms have a price cap that means that no investor actually wants to build them because they won't make any money. I don't understand how carbon capture and storage makes any money whatsoever. Maybe the electric car gigafactory might be helpful, sure, but as I say, from looking about, that's not looking too likely. And renewable ready ports, yeah, maybe that can make money. I don't know. I didn't bother looking into it because the other 3 examples were so stupid. To actually guarantee private investment, you need to promise that there's going to be growth here and some return on investment. And I don't see any promises there. I just see, right, here's a load of stuff we need for net zero. We'll put the starting money into it, and then we'll let the other investors put the money in to make up for it, which doesn't actually explain how you're going to make any growth, because green subsidies already exist. We already subsidise the green energy sector quite radically. In fact, according to the government's own website, UK levy funded support for renewable power since 2010 has totalled around £80 billion. And what, you think an extra £7 billion is going to attract £20 billion worth of private investment? Come off it. This is absolutely nothing for private investment, especially when it comes to renewable energy, green energy, whatever. You are adding, what, less than 10% of the money already going into it? And apparently we're going to do what the Tories are doing, but 10% more is apparently going to make this radical big growth that we are clearly seeing throughout the UK now. Come off it. Just to labour the point slightly more, pardon the pun, the article I'm assuming was written in 2023, but to be generous I'll say it's 2024. So let's say it's £80 billion over 14 years. That is an average investment of about £5.7 billion a year. And what Rachel Reeves is saying is that we're going to up that by £1.6 billion, and that's definitely going to cause this massive growth spurt that we're expecting in the UK economy. I could go on about this forever, but we've got a lot to go through.
And the exciting thing about these opportunities is this is not going to be jobs in London and the South East. This is going to be jobs in places like Teesside, Merseyside, Grangemouth, the Hull estuary, places where we need good jobs paying decent wages, and it will also contribute to lower energy bills and also our national energy and economic security.
A very big...
So jobs in other parts of the country that isn't just London, yeah, sure, that's fine. But as I had to go through quite a lot, these are all going into green energy sectors that, so far, sure, yeah. Having the wind blowing and the sun shining does make cheaper energy on those days. That is absolutely true. The problem is, as I've said, is that the price at the moment, especially for wind, are too low for private businesses to actually make any money. And so what that means is that the public and private investments are going to lose money on those investments. And so while with the public sector, that's no problem, you just tax people more, great. Why would the private sector keep investing, which you are saying you rely on? You're expecting 20 billion for about 7 billion public investment money? All right, well, that 20 billion just goes because it's not going to be making them any money. Unless you raise prices and then you break a promise there. You've completely put yourself in a bind with this promise. This isn't exactly diversifying an economy. This is taking the existing subsidies we have and increasing them by about 20%.
Macroeconomic picture. I'm just kind of someone listening at home just says, okay, what will be different?
This is about good jobs, lower bills, and our national security through energy security.
I am absolutely fine with all of those buzzwords. I, in fact, want them all. As I've just gone through, I don't think that's going to be delivered.
3 big things right now. Getting Putin's boot off our necks.
We relied on 4% of our oil to come from Russia. The issue with fossil fuels isn't so much that Putin is in charge of some of the oil and gas supplies to Europe. The issue is that we're on a global market for that, because absolutely everything has to be sold on a global market when it comes to fossil fuels such as oil and gas. What I'm basically saying is that even if we did have an awful lot more reliance on renewable energy, you'd still see a gas price and energy price hike, because to some extent you still got to rely on them, especially for automobiles and even for heating an awful lot of the UK, because it's going to take a hell of a lot of years to get people off gas boilers and get them on heat pumps. And that's even assuming that that innovation is going to be the best version we have for heating houses.
So that we have more homegrown domestic energy. Lower bills after the ups and downs, and mainly ups we've seen in energy bills the last few years.
Yeah, again, these are a couple of things that you have wanted the government to do harder that have caused those problems. COVID lockdowns. Though, to be fair, when it comes to the Ukraine situation, I actually don't think Labour will have been as gung-ho giving them support as Boris Johnson was, but they likely will have been kicked into action by US relations. But this is the problem, we can never have an honest conversation about the economy, because all the uni party can say to each other is that the other side of the uni party is bad.
And good jobs paying decent wages, because although we have high levels of employment, there are still too many people who are going out to work but not having the security of a job that pays a wage that they can afford to live on.
Yeah, I mean, it's become quite a meme at this point that an awful lot of companies simply don't show you when they're advertising a job what salary you can expect, and a big reason for that is because our salaries are embarrassingly low in the UK. I currently work in an IT job, and I know for a fact that if I moved to America, my salary would easily double and even triple. And if we look into where my career path can go, it can end up in places like this, where they do actually advertise the salary, by the way. Head of Pathology IT Systems at Liverpool University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. And you'd be getting anywhere between £59,000 and £69,000 a year. So to be head of IT, head of the information technology system, the whole computer system of an NHS Foundation Trust at a university hospital, that's quite a lot of responsibility and very, very important, given that basically the whole world runs on IT, and especially the NHS runs on IT. You can expect, at best, to make £20,000 less than an MP. You can expect to earn about £40,000 less than a dentist. And of course, as you go down where mass immigration actually affect people's wages even more drastically. You know, minimum wage has had to be raised to about £11 recently, and that doesn't mean that working people are going to be paid more. That means working people are going to be more unemployed, or if they are employed, have to do a hell of a lot more work to earn that £11 an hour. Because simply put, the only places that can actually afford that minimum wage are typically the big corporations pushing for it because they have even better overheads, and that pushes mid-sized businesses and especially small businesses out. So yes, we do have low wage growth, and it's been pretty much stagnant for 20 years in the UK. And what's the answer to that? Oh, let's put massive investments into industries that basically aren't going to make us money.
So our ambition is good jobs and productivity in all parts of the country, and one of the ways to achieve that is through this National Wealth Fund. We're one of the few countries, developed countries in the world, that doesn't have some sort of national or sovereign wealth fund. This would create that, and its focus would be on those good jobs paying decent wages and lower bills, and those good jobs outside of London and the South East to drive that regional growth that we want to see.
Yes, well, let's take a look at Norway. How does Norway sell the fact that it has a massive sovereign wealth fund? This fund has small stakes in about 9,000 companies worldwide, including the likes of Apple, Nestle, Microsoft and Samsung. On average, the fund holds 1.5% of all the world's listed companies. In other words, it's not showing off that, oh, we put investments into, risky R&D moves. We're not putting it in risky investments that we can't guarantee will pay it off. They say, oh yeah, you see these massive companies? Yeah, we own about 1.5% of them all, because they're pretty much guaranteed to grow with the way the global financial system works at the moment. And this is why I don't think Labour should be trusted in government, because they're too stupid to realise that that's how you make money. Instead they think, oh, this public fund, yeah, we're just going to put it in the riskiest industries we can. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, to finish this video off, I think it's worth going through Labour's 5-point plan for growth, because I really do want to expand on the points Rachel Reeves is making and explain why actually when Labour get in, yeah, things are going to get a lot worse. So point number 1, putting economic stability first by introducing a new fiscal lock to bring economic security back to our national and family finances, because we will never allow a repeat of the devastation of Liz Truss and the Conservatives' mini-budget that crashed the economy and left working people worse off. Oh my god, I'm going to have to finally actually go into it on a video. This is a short expert from Christopher Snowdon's Substack, who is head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and this is from his article, Liz Truss didn't break the economy, it was broken when she got there. In January 2022, a month before Russia invaded Ukraine, inflation was running at 5.5% in the UK, 5.1% in the EU, and 7.5% in the US. 8 months earlier, the Bank of England had predicted a temporary rise in inflation that would peak at 2.5% in Q4 2021. With that forecast in tatters, it now leapt into action by raising interest rates to 0.5%. Unsurprisingly, this didn't have much of an effect, and in May 2022, when inflation hit 9.1%, the Bank of England raised interest rates to the dizzy heights of 1% and told people not to ask for a pay rise. This too failed to achieve very much. By September, inflation was at 10.1%, the pound had fallen from $1.37 to 1.13 since the start of the year, 30-year gilt yields had risen from 1% to 3.5%, a recession or something very close to it had already begun, interest rates rose to 2.25%, and it was a question of when, not if, they would rise again. And this was the backdrop to the mini-budget of 23 September, the cornerstone of which was colossally expensive, but strangely uncontroversial energy price cap, which was actually put into law and kept into law. Don't ask me. On top of this largesse, the Chancellor added cuts to income tax, national insurance and stamp duty and froze corporation tax. It was a sign that Britain was under new management. If people didn't want spending cuts or higher taxes, there was only one course of action, the single-minded pursuit of economic growth. He then goes into all the bad plays that Liz Truss made. Don't get me wrong, even I don't think she's blameless in all this. However, if you haven't noticed, the problem from that little excerpt is that the Bank of England effectively keep trying to kick the problem down the road, with massive cash injections from quantitative easing, keeping interest rates below that of inflation, which effectively means that lending money becomes very cheap, but also means that there is barely any return on investment, and you're probably going to see a lot of defaulting on loans in the near future. And probably the worst thing to do in a time like that is to have a massive public spending policy, which actually is the only part that gets put in, while lowering taxes to help incentivise growth, which may do it, but certainly not by enough that we needed it to, while having absolutely no supply-side reforms that everyone was waiting for, but that really Liz Truss probably should have rushed through. Long story short, Liz Truss was dealt a bad hand and played it badly, but despite the broadcast media spending a fortnight treating every day as if it was Black Wednesday, she did not crash the economy as the Labour Party have claimed and apparently still are claiming. The economy was already in pieces, and there was much worse to come. Goldman Sachs has already taken 0.6% off the UK's GDP forecast for 2023, partly because of the rise in corporation tax, not the fact that Liz Truss wasn't going to raise it. There is nothing to celebrate about the return of an orthodoxy that has brought us an insane housing market, negative real interest rate, double-digit inflation, tax at a 70-year high, exponential spending on the worst health service in Europe, £2.4 trillion of debt, and lower wages than we had in 2008. And as far as I can tell already from point one, there's not really anything that's actually going to cause stabilisation. Effectively, they want the same thing to carry on. If Liz Truss is their example of, we don't want to do that, instead we want to carry on orthodoxy, then we're going to get the same thing we've had for years and worse. Anyway, on to point 2. Get Britain building again. By reforming planning laws to kickstart 1.5 million new homes, transport clean energy and new industries in all parts of the country. Because cheaper bills, the chance to own your own home and modern infrastructure are key to growth and the foundations of security. Again, I would love if they were going to bring in supply-side reforms. I don't really trust them to do so. Until I hear the words, we are going to get rid of the 1948 Town and Planning Act, I don't believe a word of it. And trust me, with how powerful NIMBYs are in the UK, there is no way you're going to even get 500,000 homes built, let alone 3 times that amount. And even 500,000 is probably an overstatement. Backing British business. With a new industrial strategy created in partnership with business to maximise Britain's strength in life sciences, digital, creative, financial industries, clean power and automotive sectors, creating a national wealth fund to unlock billions of pounds of private investment, crowding in 3 times the amount of public investment, because growing businesses are the best route to high-paid jobs everywhere. Yes, that's true, and as I already pointed out, from the main sectors that they want to focus with this national wealth fund, it's basically what is already being spent anyway, just 20% more, and we are not seeing the massive growth that Labour are promising now. Why would it grow in the future? Kickstarting a skills revolution. A new generation of technical excellence colleges offering, more education, offering more high-quality apprenticeships and training opportunities tailored to local jobs in all parts of the country, because higher skills are good for growth and raising living standards. I mean, it doesn't have to be technical excellence colleges. You could just have apprenticeships on the job, just incentivise it. But at least here they're paying lip service to something that I do actually think we need in the UK, which is actually training the current generation. Because at the moment, again, it's another meme going around, but a lot of places are asking for a ridiculous amount of experience for what is effectively an entry-level job, and it would probably actually be good to offer said experience in some way. And if the government are helping with that, that's fine. Even if it's done through the public sector, that's fine. I'd rather incentivise the private sector to do it because they do it more efficiently and better, but I will take this. Finally, number 5, making work pay. By introducing a new deal for working people and delivering a genuine living wage, banning 0-hour contracts and ending fire and rehire. I'm not being funny. It is basically impossible to fire anyone who is past their probation period. Basically impossible. I don't know any examples in the UK of fire and rehire in practice. I am sure there are, but I actually think a big problem we have in the UK at the moment is that it's actually basically impossible to fire people. And incompetent people can stay in their jobs pretty much indefinitely as long as they do the absolute minimum. And even then it can be beyond the minimum. And 0-hour contracts is also one of those odd things that the only people I really see complaining about them are people that have never had them before. And people I know who have had them and don't like them typically leave that job for another one. Because 0-hour contracts are typically for very low paid jobs, usually on minimum wage. And are there for if a company has too many people working at a seasonal period, they can say, well, you're on 0 hours, so we're not paying you this week. And I understand why people think that's unfair, but 0-hour contracts are pretty well advertised, and if people want that and are happy with a job with 0-hour contracts, why ban them at all? Anyway, because creating well-paid jobs across all parts of our country will make working people better off and more secure. Yeah, sure, fine. This will happen naturally anyway if you just allow businesses and the economy to grow, but as Liz Truss said, we have an anti-growth coalition. And using more public money I don't think is going to lead to the growth that Labour want to expect. But like most things, I think it's better to wait for the manifesto anyway. I can't imagine anything particularly impressing me from it, but I guess I'll keep an open mind. From what I've read and heard today, though, I am expecting maybe not necessarily a disaster, but certainly a worse situation than we have seen for the last 14 years. And I can't see them improving the economy any more than the Tories did. So here we are, stuck between absolutely two useless post-Keynesian orthodoxy-following parties, and anytime anyone has threatened that orthodoxy, they get kicked out because they quote-unquote crashed the economy that, as we say, was already crashed. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.